Well, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga will later today announce the 2023 Matric Results. In fact, let's go back to our reporter, Chriselda Lewis, live at the Mosaïek Church in Johannesburg. Chriselda, we were obviously speaking a little earlier on, and we're building up closer to the IEB results set to be released by the Basic Education Minister. We're reflecting on the journey we've taken ourselves. It's been many, many moons. Let me hand it back to you for more analysis as we edge closer.
All right, Liesl, welcome back. Indeed, still live from Randburg here in Johannesburg. This is, of course, where the Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, will be releasing those much anticipated results. The class of 2023 will get a sense of basically how they performed. But of course, those results at schools tomorrow will certainly wait to see if all that hard work has really paid off. Who worked hard? Who didn't work hard? But I can tell you the anxiety, I can only but imagine for those over 800,000 matriculants, the class of 2023, the nerves that they're going through at this particular time. But certainly we build up to the official event, of course, taking place. There will also be a technical briefing from the Department of Basic Education, which will also bring to you live here on the program. And that will basically look at quite a number of things. The breakdown of, matriculants that participated in the examinations last year, and a number of aspects. We get a glimpse, certainly, of what the Department of Basic Education has to say. I think that's round about 4 o'clock. We'll bring that to you live. But I want to bring in now Mary Metcalfe, who is a professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg. Mary, thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure to get some insights from you on education. Your expectations from the cohort of 2023?
It's an interesting question to say, what do we expect? Because education systems change very slowly. And if you look at what's been achieved in South Africa since 1994, we've got nearly double the number of young people writing the National Senior Certificate. It's probably closer to about 40%. Now, that represents huge change in the system, to have so many more young people going through the system. In that period, there's some patterns that are pretty much set. And the first pattern that is pretty much set is if you look at interprovincial comparisons. The more highly performing provinces and the least highly performing provinces in the NSC are divided by wealth and poverty, to put it as simply as that. So we'll see the same patterns in terms of which provinces are performing better. Obviously, there's sometimes interesting variations. But I liked where you started, because where we must always start with the NSC is the learners themselves. So the celebration that will happen today of top performing learners, hopefully for many joy at their results tomorrow, all of that is incredibly important. But because the NSC is the only indicator we have of quality in the system, there's so much public focus on the NSC results. And what we need is other public discussions on indicators of progress, because the more we understand where the system isn't working, the more we can intervene.
And you spoke about the comparisons between wealthy and poor. Do we see that? We always have the IEB results that come out first. And we're always seeing, is it a more than 96% pass rate there? Is that telling of?
It does tell us a lot.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say congratulations to those IEB learners, because they really have done well. But we need to understand, I think, 3 things. Firstly, that the learners who wrote the IEB are a very small section of the South African population. It's only about 15,000 learners who wrote the IEB National Senior Certificate, whereas we're closer to 900,000 who wrote the DBE. What's the difference between these two groups other than size? Well, first of all, the DBE's National Senior Certificate is what the public system writes. And the public system of education stretches across the length and the breadth of the country. It reaches every small village.
Yeah.
So what we see in the DBE's National Senior Certificate results is a spread of performance that really is completely representative of the country as a whole, whereas the IEB's small percentage are learners who are in families which have sufficient disposable income to send their children to top-end private schools, and I'll come back to top-end if you're interested.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, if those learners were in the public system, they would get just as good results. So it's wrong to compare the IEB schools do better, because if you look at it just like that, you're forgetting that they're not dealing with the backlog of poverty that the public school system is dealing with across the country.
I want to talk about the category. We'll come back to that, but I want to talk about the categories of pass. You know, let's break that down.
Okay, so there's 4 categories of pass. Now, in order to explain that, what we need to understand is the National Senior Certificate is the point within the current school system where learners are given guidance into future career possibilities. So it almost streams people into different directions. That's the first point about the categories of pass. The second thing is that from 1996 or so, the country has tried to create within a national qualification framework a system where learners can perhaps perform within a particular level of the system, but they can branch and progress. So any category of pass that you get in the NSC is not permanent.
Right.
On your matric certificates, on your NSC certificate, but by enrolling in different universities or different colleges or different opportunities, adult education centers, community colleges, you can find your way up to navigate the ladder. Now, what are the categories? So there's 4 categories.
Right.
The one category which is always the one that many learners are hopeful to get is you can proceed to a degree. Now that's a particular level within the National Qualifications Framework, and your performance within the NSC says proceed bachelor's.
Right.
So it's bachelor's passes. Then it says proceed to a diploma. That's a different level within the NSC. It doesn't mean that you must give up hope because you can't go to university now.
Yeah.
It means that you divert to an institution which is matched to how you're performed at this stage in your life, and then you proceed. So it's bachelor's, diploma, certificate, it's another branch. And then there's a pass with just the National Senior Certificate, and it means your performance was not good enough to proceed in any of these branches. But again, it's not final. There's matric rewrite, there's going into a TVET college. So the beauty of the National Qualifications Framework is it opens possibilities instead of having to start at the bottom of the ladder again.
Then there's always that interprovincial competition that we see. The Free State has been doing very well for quite some time. I think was it followed by Gauteng again, if my memory serves me
the
well.
top performers for many years, and there's reasons for it, so we'll
Let's
come
go
to
through that,
is Western Cape, Gauteng, and Free State. Last year, KwaZulu-Natal did very well. So the top performers tend to be the wealthier provinces, but carry on.
All right, the wealthier provinces. Then I guess it raises the question about what I raised with the unions a bit earlier on, how the rural schools are going to perform. There are a number of interventions that have been made. Those have also been outlined. But it'll be very interesting to see how that fares in terms of whether there'll be any improvement in the result that we get to see in the next couple of hours.
It's such an important thing for us to think about as a country. I personally don't like the kind of ranking that says this is the top province and this is the bottom province, because for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't really take into account the real realities of the provinces at the bottom. And secondly, I don't think we push the top performing provinces enough. I'll tell you why. You know, you can go to the Stats SA website. They've got a poverty report. They've got a map which shows the levels of poverty for every municipality in the country. There are these big, dark, angry patches of poverty, which has not changed since our homelands. Because if you look at that map relative to old maps of the homelands, which of course is history now for many people, but the persistence of poverty that came from apartheid in the rural areas in particular completely matches levels of poverty now. It completely matches levels of lack of infrastructure in schools. So to say to a province such as Limpopo, which carries a huge burden of poverty, Eastern Cape, huge burden of poverty, and to say to them, you came last, rather than to say, okay, let's look at how you're performing, let's look at how poverty affects, and let's celebrate your successes as well as helping you in terms of new challenges.
But those patches are nothing new. Are we pumping enough resources then? Because certainly what we'd then need to do is look at the trends that have persisted over the past couple of years. In particular, if you're looking at these rural provinces, is there enough being pumped in to a problem which should long have been, and I'm sure the Basic Education Department knows where these challenges are. Are we seeing enough being pumped into dealing with the challenges in these areas that need that kind of assistance?
So firstly, I think to say that this is part of a greater social challenge in the whole of South Africa.
Right.
We've got perhaps the highest Gini coefficient in the world. So there's issues around social development, economic development, rural development, which will all have an impact on schooling. If we look at schooling in particular, there's a range of mechanisms. I want to start with the National School Nutrition Program. Because the National School Nutrition Program is responding to the absolute reality of child hunger and child malnutrition, where children get a meal every day. But what's interesting about the National School Nutrition Program relative to this comparison is the number of children who receive that in Eastern Cape and Limpopo is much greater than in Gauteng and Western Cape. So we've got education interventions which seek to support children. There's also policy interventions which try to direct resources to education to be more pro-poor. So the key mechanisms for that would be the amount that is given to each school in terms of the school governing body, to be able to provide the operational expenses. And I know you were in schools yesterday, so you would have seen it. Schools need to spend money on textbook, on stationery, on security, on maintaining infrastructure. There's a whole list. So the way that government directs that funding to school is that the poorest 60% of schools receive that money from government. And that means that they're no-fee schools. Whether or not that's working as well as it should, we must talk about. The wealthier or less poor 40% parents make contributions. The second thing is that the distribution of teachers is meant to be pro-poor, but it is not working as well as it should. So within the available policy instruments, there's school feeding, there's funding for schools, it's the way we distribute our teachers. But I think we need to look hard and critically about what more we can do.
What does that distribution look like in terms of teachers? Because this is also an issue that the unions have also raised, is the issue relating to the shortage of teachers. These are classrooms where you have over 100 learners in one classroom, and it's almost impossible.
It is impossible.
It's impossible to really try and get or to give individual attention to each of these learners who have very different challenges trying to navigate the school year.
So it is true that there are classrooms over 100, but I would say that those are shocking examples at the end. How many classrooms there are over 100, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was a study published last year by Dr. Gabriel Wills, which did a detailed examination of actual class sizes.
Right.
Because you have to dig and dig and dig into the research to really get this information. Because if you look at pupil spend, if you look at what the teacher-pupil ratios are supposed to be, they don't take into account what Magwena Maluleka was saying earlier. You can allocate a particular number of teachers to a school based on enrollment, but you often have issues such as availability of classrooms. You have issues such as the subjects that are offered. You have a range of matters within the school. Now, what Dr. Will's research showed is that there are, in again the rural provinces, a general pattern of class sizes that are way above the 35-40 ratio. So the more we get our excellent researchers doing the detailed work of getting into the data and providing information that has evidence base, the more we need public debates to say what can we do about this. The question of what we can do about class sizes is going to be driven by the very difficult situation that education finds itself in 2024, which is that the country has not made the economic progress that we would have hoped. We are not seeing the increase in the tax base, and that is having an impact on how much money is available. So to be a little sort of despondent on what should be a day of celebration, we are going to see an impact on province's ability to appoint all the teachers that they want, on the province's ability to make sure that schools get the individual resources that should come through the school funding. It's going to impact on scholar transport. It's a hard time for education officials and a hard time for schools, which is why we need communities to stand up.
All right. Thank you so much. Always great. I hope we can get an opportunity to speak after we get a sense of what is really going on once the Minister makes, of course, that announcement, revealing, of course, releasing the matric results for the class of 2023. In just about a couple of hours now, of course, hosting some of those top achievers as well, those who've really, really done great. It'll be very interesting to see as well which areas do those that have really excelled come from. Maybe it's something worth also taking a look at. Thank you very much indeed, Mary Metcalfe, who's the Professor of Practice at the University of Johannesburg, with some insights. Hope to speak to her once again after that announcement is made by the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga. We're still expecting at 4 o'clock that technical briefing by the Department of Basic Education. Over 800,000 matriculants sat for their exams last year. Liesl, we'll throw back to you in studio, and we'll chat to you again a bit later on.
All right, thanks, Chriselda. We'll keep monitoring developments as we edge closer to those announcements.